Tonight, Texas once led the nation when it came to helping children of undocumented immigrants get a college education.
Being 142 ayes, 1 nay, House Bill 1403 is finally passed.
That was 24 years ago when Texas became the first state in the nation to let undocumented students who were brought to the state as kids get in-state tuition at Texas universities.
I want to say year-round tuition and housing, I paid like $31,000.
But earlier this year, that was abruptly reversed.
It's like quadrupled the amount. I mean, 6 times.
The state suddenly ended the program, bowing to a lawsuit from the U.S. Justice Department that claimed the law was unconstitutional.
Well, the students haven't changed, the politics have changed.
It's unfair to students like me, to Texans like me.
Now, tens of thousands of students are in limbo, unsure how to afford college. In this special edition of Capital Tonight, we're looking at the impact of that decision on students, on our economy, and on the future of our state. It all starts right now. Hello, and thanks for joining us here on tonight's special edition of Capital Tonight. I'm James Barragan. When Texas lawmakers passed the Texas DREAM Act in 2001, the thinking was that students would be seen as Texans in all respects but one, their citizenship status. And their belief was children shouldn't pay for the choices their parents made when crossing the border. But 24 years later, a lot has changed in Texas. Our Rena Diamante shows us how we got here.
Well, I wasn't going to cross state lines to find you.
These days,
we weren't asked any questions.
It can get contentious.
Vote no on this piece of crap.
On the floor of the Texas House of Representatives.
No, let them laugh.
But 24 years ago,
Shirley's out on third reading and final passage, House Bill 1403.
One law you would think would be controversial by today's standards passed with little debate or much fanfare.
Members, this is the bill that we passed last week relating to the eligibility of certain persons to
That's former State Representative Rick Noriega, the main sponsor of the Texas DREAM Act. He said it was inspired by a student who fled civil war in El Salvador in the 80s.
Being 142 ayes, 1 nay, House Bill 1403 is finally passed.
Noriega says, looking back, it was straightforward.
Republicans and Democrats alike voted for it because it aligned with conservative values of self-reliance and with progressive values of fairness and opportunity. And that's the Texas spirit at its best, practical, compassionate, and forward-looking.
The Texas DREAM Act guaranteed in-state tuition to undocumented students who graduated from a Texas high school and had been living in the state for at least 3 years. It also required students to sign an affidavit stating they would file for permanent residency at the earliest opportunity to do so.
It's a heartbreak for a lot of the families whose students have graduated from Texas schools, then only to have to pay out-of-state tuition.
The bill passed with overwhelming bipartisan support in both chambers, a Democrat-led House and a Republican-led Senate. With Republican Governor Rick Perry's signature in June 2001, Texas became the first state to implement a law of this kind. It led to a domino effect of other states passing similar legislation. Many say it took a diverse coalition that involved the Texas business community.
We realized that the undocumented immigrants at that time played an incredibly important role in the Texas economy. They largely were involved in agriculture, construction, and hospitality, and played a critical role in helping maintain a healthy economy in Texas for all Texans.
The immigration attorney who helped to draft the legislation says that under the policy, the Dreamers, undocumented immigrants who were brought to the U.S. as children, have given back.
What's actually happened is that many of the DREAM Act students have gone on to become permanent residents, and lawyers and doctors and professionals and so many other things. So it really has worked wonders, and it has transformed the lives of so many students.
Now, almost 25 years later, amid President Donald Trump's second term, the law is under threat. In June, President Trump's Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against the state of Texas looking to block the Texas DREAM Act. Instead of defending the law, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton agreed with the DOJ, which effectively stopped the implementation of the policy.
Sadly, we're in a very different time in which immigration has become been sort of taken over by what I would say an extremist agenda. And at that time, I think there was much more bipartisan thinking about immigration.
It's unfortunate that the administration has taken this position. But again, they're being driven by the primary, and the Republican office holders, with very, very few exceptions, are not willing to take on Donald Trump because they're fear of the primary battles.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Noriega says the national conversation over immigration has become more polarizing and divisive.
The students haven't changed, the politics have changed. In 2001, we led the nation with compassion and common sense, and in 2025, we're back to fear and division.
Armbruster, Barrientos, Burnson, Bivens.
Nearly a quarter century later, what once united lawmakers around immigration and workforce
for House Bill 1403 is finally passed.
Now stands to divide them.
And thank you to those senators.
For Capital Tonight, I'm Rena Diamante.
So, if the bill was so popular in 2001, why repeal it? Earlier this year, on June 4th, the United States Department of Justice sued Texas, claiming the DREAM Act, quote, directly conflicts with federal immigration law. And just 6 hours later, Texas agreed. The state and the DOJ filed a joint motion saying the law would be repealed. And just like that, nearly a quarter century of precedent and opportunity for undocumented students gone in an instant. The ruling came down roughly 2 months before the fall semester, leaving thousands of students in limbo. For many, it means delaying educational plans or taking on crippling loans. And for some, it means abandoning the dream of higher education altogether. I spoke to a few students, including Oscar Silva, who's fighting in court to reinstate the Texas DREAM Act. He's just a year from graduating, but his tuition at the University of North Texas has nearly doubled since the repeal. A move he tells me felt like a slap in the face.
The day it did happen, I was in class and I was freaking out.
As Oscar Silva entered his last year of school at UNT this summer, state officials abruptly ended the Texas DREAM Act. It turned his dream of a higher education upside down.
I was kind of nervous at the idea that someone was going to come in and tell me, hey, you can't be in this classroom anymore. That's how it felt.
Silva's parents brought him to the U.S. when he was 1 year old. He says he feels like a Texan through and through. But the state of Texas no longer sees him that way, which is why in June, Silva asked a federal court to stop the state from ending the law.
It's a big slap to the face to all kinds of Texas students who just simply want to acquire higher education.
We've seen the last 4 or 5 election cycles be focused on border security and immigration issues. That is no coincidence.
Brandon Rottinghouse, a political science professor at U of H, said that in 2001, Republicans were starting to dominate the state and looking to lock down the Hispanic vote. But nearly a quarter century later, the party's outlook has changed.
They no longer see the minority base as a component of their electorate. They're looking in other directions for this.
Today's Texas GOP is more reliant on social battles like abortion, LGBTQ issues, and especially a hard line on immigration.
It took a very long time, but the emphasis on border security became the #1 issue for Republicans.
But Republicans repeatedly failed to repeal the DREAM Act at the legislature. That's because it's considered popular with the state's voters. The U.S. Justice Department gave immigration hardliners another way to reach their goal. Silva hopes his own lawsuit will counteract that. He argues throwing out the law will cause him significant hardship. Silva's tuition has doubled, just as he's trying to complete the master's degree he needs to pursue a career as an accountant. He's already got a job offer waiting for him once he completes his degree. But to do that, he relies on his wife, a public school teacher, and he's taken out private loans. Other students are postponing their education altogether.
Honestly, I didn't see it coming.
Fernanda is a sophomore at UT Austin. We're only using her middle name and not showing her face because she fears immigration consequences for speaking out. She was brought to the U.S. from Mexico after her mother died when she was 4. Her sister, a U.S. citizen, became her guardian. She's tried to fix her immigration status ever since and hopes to become a doctor. But when the state ended the DREAM Act, her tuition went up from around $6,000 a semester to around $22,000. Unable to secure that kind of money, Fernanda made the tough call to put her studies on hold.
And it is a little bit disheartening seeing people that I know and are very close to me kind of go to school when I'm not.
This affects students. This affects Texas students. Students that live here, that have been raised here, that know Texas and that they bleed Texas. Like, Texas is all they know.
A court rejected Silva's plea to get involved in the lawsuit back in August. But Silva and other plaintiffs have appealed that decision. They're waiting for a ruling from the Fifth Circuit, but for now, their fate remains in limbo. We know the DREAM Act made a clear impact on dreamers when it passed with bipartisan support. So, what do the original lawmakers think now? Well, you heard from the author, State Representative Rick Noriega, earlier. Here's how the rest of the legislature lined up. 63 House Republicans voted for the bill, and all but 3 senators supported it as well. But today, most of them have stayed silent. We reached out to 6 lawmakers who voted for the bill in 2001 and who still serve at the Capitol. You can see them here on your screen. None responded to our request for comment. But not everyone is unhappy about the decision to end the DREAM Act. Some immigration hardliners have pushed this for years. We sat down with a representative from one of those groups for their thoughts on the repeal of the 24-year-old law. Joining me now is Jessica Vaughn, Director of Policy Studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. Now, Jessica, your group has pushed to end laws like the Texas DREAM Act for years. When you see what happened with the DREAM Act earlier this year after the DOJ lawsuit, do you consider that a victory, and why?
Well, I think it is a victory for the integrity of our immigration laws and for taxpayers, and for the rule of law, frankly, because Congress passed a law saying that it would be illegal for states to offer in-state tuition and other benefits to illegal aliens, and unless states were actually going to offer those same in-state benefits to American citizens from out of state. And so the Texas law was a violation of that law and should have been enjoined. If it had not ended in this way, then the Department of Justice would have had to actually take legal action against the state of Texas. And the governor of Texas did not want that to happen. The attorney general, most likely the legislature either. Frankly, this is a little bit of a bailout for Texas politicians that perhaps didn't want to be seen voting against this. So the Trump administration is doing a favor for some of the squishier lawmakers in Texas that did not want to have to do the right thing on their own.
And now you've heard the arguments for maintaining laws like this. We've talked to some economists who say there could be hundreds of millions of dollars that are taken out of the Texas economy. What's your response to that?
Well, in fact, taxpayers should not be asked to subsidize the education of individuals who are here in defiance of our laws and who cannot work with those degrees in the country because they don't have permission to be here. And people do not want to really try to normalize the presence of illegal immigrants. And that's really what this law is all about.
In terms of the workforce of the state, is it sort of, because they won't be able to, as you said, enter the workforce as easily, but it sounds like maybe you think that that's more of a feature than a bug.
It is a feature because that's the law. Employers are not allowed to hire people who are not authorized to work in this country, if they're here illegally especially. So that is going to preserve job opportunities for Texans who graduate from these schools, or for American citizens who want to come in from out of state to have the potential to compete for these jobs.
While many of the elected leaders from that era have moved on from politics, some remain among Texas's most influential voices. Back then, Governor Greg Abbott served as a justice on the Texas Supreme Court. He didn't respond to my request for comment, but when the law was repealed this summer, Abbott wrote this on social media, announcing, quote, "In-state tuition for illegal immigrants in Texas has ended." Things were different for current Secretary of State Jane Nelson. She served in the Texas Senate at the time and was one of only 3 no votes. She also didn't respond to our request for comment, but her position then was clear. Meanwhile, Senator John Cornyn was Texas Attorney General in 2001, the state's chief legal officer, who would have weighed in on the bill's legality. We reached out, and Cornyn now says he's glad the governor took swift action, saying, quote, "Texas taxpayers shouldn't be funding education for illegal immigrants." So we've told you about how the law came to be and how its repeal will impact students. But what does it mean for Texas? Let's look at the numbers. Right now, a Texas immigrant who is at least 25 years old working full-time with a college degree is estimated to earn about $80,000 a year. That's roughly $40,000 more than an immigrant with only a high school diploma. And in taxes, that's about $2,000 extra dollars paid every year by a college-educated immigrant. And taxes aren't the only impact the Texas economy will face. I caught up with one of the state's leading economists, Ray Perryman, while he was in Austin. He told me the business community still strongly supports and remains committed to the Texas Dream Act. But the same can't be said for the state's top political leaders. Dr. Perryman, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, James.
So the business community was one of the big stakeholders that actually advocated for the Texas Dream Act. What does it say about the state that there's been a whole 180, and what kind of impact could there be on the Texas economy?
Well, I'm not sure there's been a 180 among the business community. Obviously, politically, the winds have changed considerably, but it was a good idea back then. It was a good idea now because we have long-term workforce needs in this state in many industries, and it's absolutely critical. And when you have young people who have lived here for several years, they finished high school here, they've said they're going to apply for permanent residency as soon as they're eligible, and you want to help them become educated, you're basically helping the workforce of tomorrow.
I hear you talking about these students who have grown up here and in many ways consider themselves Texans. Is there a fear that if they don't have access to higher education in the way that they used to under the Dream Act, there could be a brain drain for us here in the state?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it could happen a couple of ways. Number one, they can leave. Obviously, that's the most obvious way. But the other way is they're simply not able to pursue education because of the extra expense that's associated with it. And in many cases, they're coming from families with lower socioeconomic backgrounds, maybe not a heritage of people going to college. If they're discouraged from going, and if it becomes too expensive for them, then basically we end up with a person here in the state who otherwise would have been a much more valuable worker, someone who would have contributed more to our economy, to our tax base, and everything else. I mean, these folks, calculations I saw a couple of years ago showed that the added earnings just from the folks who have gone through that in Texas were about $240 million a year, right? Just the extra amount they earned because they went through this. The graduates, if you take that and work it through the whole economy, what it means for our whole economy, you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar impact.
Is it a situation where other states could maybe take advantage of the loss that we have here in Texas, or is it just a loss all around?
Absolutely. I mean, labor is mobile, and if there's greater opportunity somewhere else, folks could decide to go somewhere else. And the currency, James, the currency of economic development for the next few decades is going to be your workforce. And we've done a lot of things in this state to promote ourselves in terms of economic development, and this one is just completely counterproductive to get rid of the Dream Act.
And Dr. Perryman, you talked a little bit about how business was on the side of the Texas Dream Act. They pushed for it. They've never really shied away. I know there was a coalition this legislative session trying to fight to keep the Texas Dream Act, and they succeeded during the legislative session. Right. Of course, that was all repealed by this lawsuit.
Right.
But if the Texas business community is still in favor of the Texas Dream Act and they held such sway in 2001, why are things so different now? Are Texas elected officials not listening to them anymore?
Well, I try to stay away from politics as much as I can. I don't do a very good job of it, but I try. But yeah, the political environment has clearly changed. I mean, a lot of the groups that helped to bring some very good legislation to the state have now sort of seen things go into different directions, basically on culture wars and things like that. And the bottom line is, when you talk about not educating these folks, as my granddaddy would say, who was a dirt farmer in East Texas, you're eating your seed corn. You're taking away the things that you're going to have to be successful in the future. Construction industry, tech industry, agriculture industry, health industry across the board. We need these folks working. We need these folks to be well trained to contribute in the future.
Up next on a special edition of Capitol Tonight. Before this year's abrupt changes, the Texas DREAM Act had nearly 25 years of success. After this, we're taking a look at those success stories to see just how impactful this law has been. Welcome back. On this special edition of Capitol Tonight, we've shown you how the repeal of the Texas DREAM Act could impact Texas. But we also want to show you how the law has helped Texans for more than 2 decades. Our Aaron Davis spoke to people who know firsthand just how life-changing the law was.
The motto of UT, right? What starts here changes the world. And to me, that's exactly what happened.
After Julieta Garibay visited the University of Texas at Austin as a kid, she couldn't imagine going anywhere else. But she couldn't afford the international tuition rates she was charged as an undocumented student, even though she lived in Texas since 3rd grade.
I had to make the decision of actually going back to Mexico to try to at least get higher education because in the U.S. it was going to be impossible.
As Garibay went back to Mexico after high school, Rosendo Ticas had to put his dream of being an aviation mechanic on hold. After a semester of community college, the school found out Ticas was undocumented and charged him the international student rate.
So I had to drop out and I didn't continue because I couldn't afford it.
Ticas moved to Texas as a middle schooler in the late 80s to escape a civil war in El Salvador.
The rebels, they were knocking on the door. So I remember I was laying down on the bed and they point a M60 on my back.
He shared his story with Houston Representative Rick Noriega, who sponsored the Texas DREAM Act. This allowed undocumented students who graduated from a Texas high school to pay in-state tuition for college, university, and certificate programs like the one Ticas completed.
I settled with an aviation certificate and it went pretty good because I've been doing that since 2007. The worst thing that you can do is give up. I didn't give up, and I still haven't given up on me.
At the state's 3 biggest public universities, there is at least an $8,000 price difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition. The DREAM Act helped make Ticas post-secondary education more accessible and provided financial help for generations of dreamers who call Texas home.
This is where I want to set roots.
Feeling homesick, Garibay came back to Texas at the same time lawmakers passed the Texas DREAM Act. She benefited from the new law as part of the first class of UT Austin's undocumented graduates. She founded United We Dream, the largest immigration youth-led network in the country, and is now advocating for the reinstatement of the Texas DREAM Act.
I think this has been one of the hardest times of being involved because there is anger that they took away a 24-year-old law that had benefited so many folks. There is sadness of knowing what it feels like to be undocumented. And wanting to get education, a higher education, and being told the doors are closed for you.
What do you say when you speak with undocumented students about how they should navigate accessing higher education at this time?
If you only can afford 1 class, heck, that's amazing. Take 1 class. Take your time. Don't rush. It's okay.
Andrea Ramos moved from Mexico to San Antonio when she was in the 3rd grade, never knowing a time when in-state tuition wasn't an option. She founded the Dreamers Resource Center at her alma mater, UT at San Antonio.
The community was extremely needed as people had questions about what was happening next. And obviously, this is something that is still needed even now today, as we're seeing immigration rates happening like very front facing.
Rosendo, Julieta, and Andrea couldn't picture where they'd be if they hadn't benefited from the Texas DREAM Act, and they empathize with the over 70,000 undocumented students in Texas who now won't be able to. For Capitol Tonight, I'm Aaron Davis.
So, what comes next? Right now, a coalition of 30 Texas organizations is fighting to overturn the repeal in court. They filed a brief with the Fifth Circuit saying the affected parties in Texas never had the opportunity to resist these efforts. They urged the court to let the legal process play out. That brief was filed more than 2 months ago. Once the state responds, the plaintiffs will get a chance to reply as well. That brings us to the end of our show, but for these students, it's not the end of the fight. Thanks for watching.